If you just got your LSAT score back and it wasn't what you expected, if it came back way lower than what you've been hitting on your practice tests, you're not the only one. Lately, I've been hearing the same thing from a lot of students: emails, DMs, Reddit posts, comments on my YouTube videos, and the message is basically the same every single time. Student tells me, Steve, I don't get it. I didn't panic. I didn't blank out. I didn't feel terrible walking out of the test. And my score came back 10, 15, even 20 points lower than my practice test average. And if that sounds like you, look, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You didn't suddenly forget how to take the LSAT. I want to talk through what's really going on with these LSAT score drops, why it feels off, and what you can do about it. And I want to handle the big question right off the bat. If you're wondering if LSAC messed up your score, the answer is, unfortunately, almost certainly not. The LSAT isn't graded by some random guy. It's all done by computer. It gets checked by people whose job it is to look at the scoring data and flag anything that looks weird. And so if something was off, it would have gotten caught. LSAC is also one of the slowest, most bureaucratic, most by-the-book organizations on the planet. If they really screwed up thousands of scores, they wouldn't let it slide. They would have to send out a correction, tell law schools, it would be all over the news. So ask yourself this: if LSAC really botched the scoring for thousands of students, where are all the news stories? Where are the mass emails? Where's the class action lawsuit? You're not seeing any of that because there isn't a big scoring failure. The real explanation is less obvious and way more common. There's an idea that explains why this feels worse than it really is. It's called selection bias. When somebody takes the LSAT and scores exactly what they expected, they don't post about it. Nobody writes a viral Reddit thread called "I got my practice test average and feel totally fine with it." That post gets zero traction. And even people who did a little bit better than they expected, they usually don't post about it either. But when somebody's score drops 20 points below their practice test, it's shocking and feels unfair. And so they go online and they vent about it. And so the forums end up filling up with the worst cases: big score drops, weird stuff that happened on test day, conspiracy theories about LSAC, people speculating about secret curves. What you don't see are the thousands of students whose scores came in right where they expected. They're not posting anything. There's nothing to say. They're just moving on with their applications. And so that doesn't mean the score drops aren't real. It just means you're seeing a small, biased, unrepresentative group of the most upset people, and you treat it like it's everybody. And of course, Reddit forums, Facebook groups are fine places to vent, but they're not really a great place to figure out what actually happened. Don't compare your worst day to 100 other people's meltdown posts. And you may have heard rumors about the LSAC getting harder, that the LSAC cranked up the difficulty to punish cheaters and the curve is brutal on purpose. But LSAC isn't sitting around deciding, let's wreck everybody this one test. That's not what's happening. But there have been some more subtle changes to the LSAT that can make things feel rougher for some people, and I could walk through why that is. A couple of years ago, the LSAT had logic games, and for some people, that was a section they could really nail down with practice. They would memorize the patterns and get faster and faster, increase their accuracy. And for those people, logic games was basically a free score boost. For other people, it was a total nightmare that they couldn't crack. And so when LSAC removed the logic games section and replaced it with more logical reasoning, it didn't affect everybody the same way. It helped some people, hurt other people. In contrast, logical reasoning is a totally different animal. It rewards more careful reading and abstract thinking and being able to spot traps even when you're fatigued. And some people are great at that, others not so much. And so right off the bat, you get winners and losers, even if the LSAT overall in aggregate isn't really any harder. But the bigger thing that nobody's really talking about is LSAT score inflation. In case you haven't been following the data and the reports, over the past couple of years, LSAT scores have skyrocketed across the board. Part of that's due to the LSAT being shorter now. Part of that's due to the removal of logic games. Part of that's due to the rise in accommodations. And so all of that is pushing scores up. You can see this in the data. The medians at top schools right now would have looked crazy 10 years ago. You wouldn't have believed it if you knew what was going to happen. A score that put you near the top of the applicant pool now puts you in the middle of a much bigger crowd. And so LSAC has got to do something about that. And of course, they're not going back and changing old questions. What they're doing is tightening the curve, which is just the conversion from how many you got right to your final score. And that's where it starts to get pretty brutal because when the curve tightens, you don't have as much room to mess up. Wrong answers that used to barely move your score now drop you a lot of points, and basically small mistakes count for way more. There's less room for error. So think about it like this. You walk out of the test thinking it felt okay, and that might be true. Maybe there were a couple of weird questions, but nothing terrible. But if you missed 2 questions in one section, 3 in another, 1 more in the third, another in the fourth, that's enough to drop your score way more than it would have a couple of years ago because the room for error is so much smaller now, even if you didn't panic. And there's one more thing. A lot of students end up training for a hypothetical easy version of the LSAT without realizing it, not knowing that the actual test day version is going to be a lot harder. And what I'm talking about here is simulating test day conditions. So I want you to be honest with yourself during your practice tests about the practice test. Were you taking full 4-section practice tests in one sitting every single time? Or were you skipping the unscored experimental section because it didn't count anyway? Were you taking only a 10-minute break in the middle? Or were you stretching it out and pausing whenever you wanted to check your phone or whenever you wanted to get a snack or talk to your roommate or significant other? Were you checking your answers after every question or after every section? If your practice test looked nothing like the real thing, then your practice scores were not an accurate reflection of what you were going to do on test day. In other words, your practice test scores were inflated. So imagine that you're scoring a 170 plus average on your practice test and you feel ready. Then test day comes and it's a lot more strict and you're fatigued by section 4. By the time you get there, you've got nothing left in the tank. On top of that, you're more stressed because you know it's the real thing. And then you've got proctors interrupting you. You've got internet glitches. Your screen freezes. You get stuck on a question and now you're rushing. Any one of those on its own you could probably handle. But if you stack 2 or 3 or 4 of those factors together, you're now going to drop your score significantly, and that's going to show up in your results on test day. Taking 4 separate individual sections over the course of 4 separate individual days and adding them up does not make for a full exam because it's not testing the endurance factor. Checking your answer after every question is not a real-time section either. So it really comes down to how you practiced. If you practice easy, the real thing's going to feel brutal. If you practice hard, real thing's going to feel like just another practice run. So in terms of what this means for you now, looking at your score, it means that a lower score than you expected doesn't mean you got dumber, doesn't mean that LSAC did anything wrong. It means the LSAT is less forgiving than it used to be, and you can't win the same way you used to. Getting better at medium difficulty questions is not enough anymore because pretty much most people are getting those right. What separates the 160 scores from the 170 scores is how you do on the hardest questions, especially in logical reasoning, since that's 2/3 of the test. Any gains you make there pay off twice, and any weaknesses show up twice as well. And so if your score is not what you wanted it to be, if you're planning on retaking, here's what I'd do. First, take a couple days off. Just feel disappointed, wallow in that, take a well-deserved break, vent, scream into a pillow, whatever you got to do. Post on Reddit and vent if you need to. Then close the laptop, get back to work. Spiraling's not going to help anything. You got to do something about it. Look at your analysis, look at your practice tests leading up to the exam, and take an honest look at how you prepped. Don't just sign up for the June LSAT and start cranking out more practice tests. You want to make a proper plan. Ask yourself the hard questions. Ask yourself, was I doing 4-section practice tests or was I only doing 3? Was I reviewing every single wrong answer or just kind of glancing at them and saying, oh, I get it now? Were you training properly or just doing more questions? Test day is not a drill. It's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing and time management and endurance. Next thing you want to do is make a retake plan around whatever you missed. In other words, studying smarter, 4 full 4-section tests under timed conditions, set up exactly like test day is going to be. Of course, on this side, you can drill whatever questions that gave you trouble, whatever you missed. You want to keep a wrong answer journal, an error log, writing down why you picked the wrong answer and why the right one was better, and then work on your stamina as well. Then you want to take at least a dozen full-length timed practice tests before the big day, so test day itself will feel like just another run-through. If you're taking the LSAT in 5 or 6 weeks or so, maybe you're doing 1 practice test a week. If you're studying full-time, you could do 2 timed exams a week. You want to do it so many times that it feels boring. You've done it all before, same time of day, Same break in the middle of this exam, 10-minute break. No checking your phone, no pausing the clock. That way, by the time the real test rolls around, you'll feel like you've done this 10 times already because you have done it 10 times already. Now, LSAC does do score audits, meaning if your score came in so far below your practice range that just feels impossible, you can request one just for your peace of mind, but know that your audited score will be final, even if it comes back lower. And virtually every single audit just confirms the original. These are more of an artifact of back when the LSAT was on paper and you were bubbling it on a Scantron, and there could be a mechanical issue with the online LSAT. That's not really going to happen. So it's really just a sanity check for your peace of mind. But whatever your result was, know that your LSAT score is not a measure of your worth. It's not a measure of your intelligence. Doesn't tell you anything about what kind of lawyer you're going to be. And it's not an IQ test. It's just a test of your performance on a single day of roughly 2.5 hours. It reflects your prep system leading up to the exam, how you handle stress. And that's good news because if your score blindsided you, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you, it just means the plan you were using wasn't enough to get you the score you need for the actual official exam. And if your practice test average was higher than your official score, it means you've got that potential, but you're going to need a different approach to actualize it on test day. You're going to want to engage in deeper analysis. You're going to want to do harder questions and do more practice under real world conditions. And if you'd like my help getting that score up on a retake, whenever you're taking the LSAT again, whether it's June or August or September, October, November, beyond, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I've also put together a free easy LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. The link to get that cheat sheet is also below the video and in my bio as well. Now, scores are coming out in a couple minutes if they haven't already. You will get the email at some point in the next few minutes, most likely, but you can also log into your lsac.org account and your score might be sitting there waiting for you. In other words, the score appears in your account on lsac.org before you receive the email. And so if you're eagerly waiting, which I'm guessing you are if you're watching this right now, you can go ahead and log into your lsac.org account. It might be sitting there for you already. If not, check back, hit refresh. It'll probably come out for you in the next couple minutes. Now, I've got a question here in the chat. Got a couple of questions, actually. Feel free to keep dropping them in on anything at all, LSAT law school admissions. And of course, please do announce when your score comes back. Skip is asking, what is the last day for the LSAT this year? So the LSAT's offered 8 times a year. We already had, of course, the January and February and the April LSATs. Beyond that, you've got the June LSAT in about 5 weeks. You've got the August LSAT in a little over 3 months. Then you've got September, October, and November. The November LSAT is the last LSAT administration this calendar year. Beyond that, you've got the January and February LSATs as well. You could take any of those LSATs and still apply to law school for the coming cycle. Even the February LSAT is not too late. But of course, we're now in late April, so there's no reason that you need to wait until the February to knock out the LSAT. You could probably knock it out this fall. Even if you're brand new to studying for the LSAT, there's plenty of time in the next 3 to 6 months to study for the LSAT from scratch, take it, and achieve a top score. And if you want my help putting together a prep plan, what we do during those free tutoring lessons is we look at where you're currently at, what your goal score is, what your time frame is, and then we map out an action plan to get you from your current score to your goal score over that time frame, considering your other obligations, whether you're working, whether you're in school, whether you have family obligations. Of course, someone taking the LSAT in June, in 5 weeks, you're going to want to take a more intensive boot camp style approach. If you're taking the LSAT in August, September, or beyond, we could take more of a slow and steady approach. And we do ask a lot of our students, because that's how we get the results that we get. You got to put in the work, and you're getting a top 1% score, top 3% score. I'm talking 170, 175 plus, comes down to the amount that you study and also the way in which you study. So just doing more practice questions in drilling is not going to be enough. You got to get the questions right under test day conditions, considering pacing and time management and endurance. And so that's what we cover in the coaching program. See more questions here in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. I see here, Random is asking, should I start practicing for the LSAT early? I just re-entered school and I'm starting my associates. Study for the LSAT whenever you've got the time. I mean, your LSAT score is good for 5 years, right? So whenever you can carve out a couple months where you have a relatively light course load in college, for example, that might be a good time to start. Give yourself a runway of 3 to 6 months. A lot of students will try to knock it out in just a couple months, but achieving your top full potential typically requires a bit more than just a couple of months. Keep in mind that your competition, the gunners shooting for top scores, are giving it their all. A lot of them are in a relatively fortunate position to be able to study for the LSAT full time with no other obligations. They've got family or significant others supporting them. Not everyone's so lucky, of course. And so for that reason, you might want to give yourself a bit more time to give yourself the hours necessary to achieve your full potential. So don't rush it, but know that the LSAT's not going anywhere. If you're a freshman or a sophomore in college, I'd say focus on your GPA. Maintain a high GPA. Ideally, have an upward trend you can demonstrate on your transcript if possible. The LSAT's not going anywhere. You could always come back to it in junior year, for example. And yes, the free tutoring lessons are open to anybody and everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. Again, that's an open offer for anybody watching this now or later. Yeah, I see a question here asking, I took the LSAC out of 162, was hoping for a 168 since I want to go to a top 14 law school. I studied pretty hard before. Feel like I can get there if I take it one more time, but I'm also worried about delaying my application another cycle. Should I retake? Okay, so you dropped maybe 5-10 points, maybe 6 points from your practice test average going in. You said you were hoping for a 168, so I'm guessing that you had reasonable basis to assume that, like you were scoring around that average, but dropped a couple points. Unfortunately, score drops are all too common. Most students drop 5-8 points from their practice test to the actual. Could be nerves and anxiety, could be a bad proctor, could be a tech issue. And so you want to make sure that you're simulating test day conditions should you decide to retake, which I would recommend. Then you also just want to raise your baseline. Also, I mean, a 168, even that probably wouldn't be enough for a top 14 law school. Consider that the top 14 law schools, their LSAT medians are ranging 170 to 174 or so. And so a 168 is, frankly speaking, it's subpar, it's below the medians. Now, if you have a super high GPA, if you have a 4.0 GPA, then you could offset a relatively lower LSAT, but why put yourself in that position? If you had a 4.0 GPA, why wouldn't you match that with a killer LSAT score? But anything 160 range, I would argue, is not sufficient. Helmet's saying in the chat, GPA doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I mean, GPA doesn't mean a whole lot, in part because grade inflation's so far out of control that law schools discount GPA anyway. You want to have a higher LSAT score to compensate. And so for whatever your GP might be, if it's below a 3.9. But also, I mean, you don't need to delay your application on a retake. You could take the LSAT in June or August or September and still apply in the fall. If you were hoping to apply very tail end of this cycle, I wouldn't have recommended it regardless, because when you apply late in the cycle, there's less scholarship money available and it's also harder to get in. We'll talk more about retakes though. See a couple questions dropping in the chat. They also got their scores back. Don Quixote says got a 147. Stop Political Violence says got a 130 with no studying. Okay, so a couple folks who got scores that I'm guessing they weren't super happy about. Sorry to hear about the result, but ultimately there is a lot of room to improve. I see that Stop Political Violence is saying that was with no studying. So 130 with no studying just tells you, hey, you didn't study. But not a big surprise, right? I mean, a lot of folks, most folks, I would argue, don't hit their goals if they don't study. But you have plenty of room to improve and plenty of time to improve. All it tells you is that you haven't yet put in the work, but of course you can. And the good news is the LSAT is offered 8 times a year. There's always another LSAT just around the corner coming up in another month or two. You could take it in June, you could take it in August, you could take it in September. Any of those are fine to apply to law school this coming fall. And Don Quixote with your 147, also plenty of time and space to improve. I don't know how you studied in the lead up to this, if at all, but you can improve a lot. I personally started at a 152 with my cold diagnostic, ended up with a 175. Took me an entire year though, and at least half of that was a complete waste of time. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think, and once you do that, everything changes. And that approach and that mindset has worked for over 10,000 of my students over the past 20 years, because what really makes the difference when you're looking for that top score or a significant increase is getting the direct personalized feedback. And that's why I'm offering the free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now and later, why I'm offering these free lives that I do every single weekday. Normally we do these at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. We're doing it a bit earlier today because of the April LSAT score release, but if you're new to this, welcome. You can always come back tomorrow, Friday, beyond 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm doing live Q&A on anything at all. LSAT and law school admissions. Of course, today we're focusing a bit more on folks who took the April LSAT and are getting their scores back. I see Dialectical Puda, cool username, interesting username there, says, got a 152 on my first test with no studying. How do I practice? Well, you're in good company. I started in the exact same place with no studying. You can improve a lot. We'll talk through more how to study, how to practice. Basically, involves building a strong foundation, then doing individual timed sections to work on your pacing, then transitioning into full exams. See, Cookie here says, got a 178. Congrats, Cookie. That's awesome. Love to see it. If you have teaching and tutoring experience, if you want to help others succeed, feel free to reach out. We're always hiring instructors for our coaching program. You can DM me or shoot me an email, help@lsatunplugged.com. I see Cookies saying that was after 9 months of prep. 178 after 9 months didn't happen overnight, was a function of putting in the work. Congrats, you deserve it. Hope that you have all the success in law school admissions. Don Quixote, who got a 147, says, I've been studying for a month before and picked back up right after the test. Can I improve by June? So you studied for a month, is that what you're saying? So only a month, not a whole lot of time. Imagine if you studied for 3 months or 5 months, how much better could you do? You can improve by June in the next month and change, but you'll improve more if you give yourself more time. I mean, you could aim for June for your retake and then August as a backup. I don't know what your goals are or where you want to go to law school, but you'll do better if you give yourself more time. And if you want to improve, say, 20 points, which I recommend everybody get at least a 165 for better law school outcomes, for getting into better law schools, for getting more scholarship money. It's a function of the time. I mean, like Cookie got a 178 after 9 months. I see Cookie's following up says it was 5-6 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day, no days off. That's a pretty rigorous schedule. It's not a crazy schedule that would lead to burnout, but it is remarkably consistent. So that's what you want to keep in mind, is that consistency is probably more important than intensity. And it takes time to get a top score. Not everybody needs a 178, of course, I understand that. But the improvement that you get will be a function of blocking off the time, putting in the time day after day after day. I see Dialectical Poodle, who got the 152 with no studying, is saying here that pacing was the problem. If I had all the time in the world, would have scored much higher. Yeah, pacing's a huge issue. And that's why I think the folks who only study by drilling questions are doing themselves a disservice, because it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing and time management and endurance. And so in terms of crafting a study plan, it's going to depend in part on when you retake the LSAT, whether you're taking it in a month or taking it in 3 months or 4 or 5 or beyond. But the shape of the study plan for someone brand new to the LSAT is typically remarkably consistent. We divide it into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is drilling questions by type to build a better understanding of how to approach the different sections and the different question types. Pacing is doing individual sections to work on your time allocation, your time management, how you spend your time over the course of the section. Where do you speed up? Where do you slow down? How do you avoid getting bogged down or stuck on any one particular question? And then endurance, doing full-length timed exams. It's a lot to cram into just 5 weeks. And so for anyone who's considering when to retake the LSAT. You can retake in June, but all else being equal, giving yourself more time is going to help you, and we can do a lot more for you if you were to study for the LSAT for an August retake or beyond. And the nice thing about August is that scores come back at the end of the month in August, and you can still apply the second applications open in September. I see Sarxian's asking, do we do tutoring? Yes, we do offer custom tutoring programs. We personalize every program for the individual student, considering your current starting point, where you're at right now, what your goal score is, what your time frame is. And so if you want to talk through what a custom tutoring program could look like, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I've also put together a free easy LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab your free easy LSAT cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet, covering every section, every question type in both logical reasoning and reading comp. It's a nice, handy, quick reference, something I wish I had back when I was studying for the LSAT, giving it away totally free. Now, feel free to keep those questions coming, anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. I'll get to as many of your questions as I can here in the chat. Feel free to keep dropping them in here. And so I see Don Quixote is asking, am I saying that you should extend your study time frame? Yes, I would. I would recommend extending your study time frame to maximize the score that you could achieve, because if you want to improve 20, 25, 30 points, it's hard to do it in 5 weeks. Not saying it's impossible, but it's against the odds, to be frank. We have seen overnight successes, but those are typically from students who are doing a more intensive boot camp style approach and have few or no other LSAT obligations. So a boot camp approach, what does that look like? It involves live coaching 7 days a week. Basically private coaching every single day, covering, and you're taking practice tests 2-3 times a week, intensive review. If you're working, if you're in school, if you have family obligations, it's going to put a limitation or a ceiling on how much you could improve. And so just speaking real about it, right? Just being real about it. If you give yourself till August, though, you can achieve the same increase that somebody studying full-time could achieve by June. And ultimately, what matters at the end of the day is the score that you earn, that the score that is on your report, not how long it took you to get there. Law schools have no incentive to care about how long you studied for, and frankly, they're not even going to know how long you studied for in most cases. They also have no incentive to care how many times you took the LSAT, because they are not evaluated based on that metric. But they are evaluated based on the highest LSAT score on your record. And for that reason, there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record, which is good news. And that means there is an incentive to retake. The system is designed such that you can and should retake. I recommend that everybody retake the LSAT for that reason. If you do better, fantastic. Now you've got a higher score on your record that you're applying with. If you do worse, no big deal. Your previous relatively higher score will still count. And speaking now in late April, you could take the LSAT in June or August or September and apply really early in the cycle. Even the October and November LSATs are not too late either. And they're still early enough. The cycle has extended over time such that what used to be considered late is no longer late. Applying anytime the same calendar year that application's open is totally fine. So in other words, you could take it in November of 2026, apply November of 2026, and you would still be applying relatively early in this cycle to start law school in fall 2027. I don't think you need to give yourself that much time. That would be giving yourself 6 months and change from now. You probably could knock it out sooner, especially if you're not brand new to the LSAT, if you've been studying for a while already, if you already have that baseline familiarity with the different sections, the different question types. I think that we could get you there to your goal by August or September. Particulars matter, of course. And if you want to talk through those particulars, you could book the free tutoring with me. We could talk through it more. But I think most folks watching this who are not new to the LSAT can knock it out by August or September. If you are brand new to the LSAT, maybe give yourself till October or November. Mariah is asking, what if you are on your sixth LSAT attempt? So there are some retake limits. LSAC limits you to taking the LSAT 5 times in 5 years and 7 times for life. So if you've already taken 5 times, you're going for time number 6. Look at what period of time were those takes over. If they were all within the past 5 years, you might need to wait or might need to appeal the retake limit to get an extension. You can appeal. If there were proctor issues or tech issues, LSAC might give you a variance on that and allow you to retake again. But ultimately, the question becomes, what will you do differently next time around? I mean, doing the same thing over and over is and expecting different results is the definition of insanity, right? You got to change the variables to change the equation. What will you do differently for your next take to get a different result? If you were only self-studying in your previous attempts, if you were only using one of those LSAT prep phone books or only using practice tests and not getting any personal feedback in what you're getting wrong and why, now might be the time to get some personal support. You might want to take a course, might want to get some coaching. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, of course, because I offer all of the above. We offer personalized coaching programs, on-demand courses, small group coaching, personalized study plans. If you're looking for some help beyond what you've gotten so far, if you think it's time to bring in the big guns and get some personal feedback, you can book a free LSAT lesson with me. Free tutoring, no obligation, unpluggedprep.com/start. I'll be happy to talk you through the particulars. I see Anthony says, I got a low score. I'm aiming for 170 plus. Can I take it in August? Yeah, you absolutely can. And you're also welcome to book the free tutoring with me if you want to talk through what that could look like. I'm happy to help you out. Anthony's saying, I got a 170 on the LSAT. Congrats. Awesome. Sounds like you're pretty excited about it. If you're happy with the result, if it's what you need for law school admissions, fantastic. You've graduated to the next phase. Focus on your application essays. If you want to score higher and go for a retake, of course, we could help you out too. And for anyone who wants to book the free tutoring with me, the link to book it is in my bio and pinned in the chat on YouTube, below the video on YouTube as well. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Happy to meet with you personally or anyone else watching this now and later. Happy to talk you through your situation and get you some support. Matthias says, did you see 39,000 people signed up for the LSAT this year? So I think you're referring to the June LSAT registration numbers. I actually made a video about this. I think it was yesterday or Monday I was talking about this. But basically, don't stress, don't worry. The registration numbers don't reflect the actual number of LSAT takers because a lot of folks will withdraw or postpone in the lead up to the LSAT. In fact, I would be certain that you will see LSAC update their data when they update tomorrow morning, I think is when they update early morning each day. You're going to see that there's a lot of melt in those registrant numbers because there will be a lot of people who took the April LSAT, got their scores back today and said, you know what, I'm good. I don't have to take it in June after all. And that's going to number in the thousands. And so you see this after every LSAT administration. People are like panicking and the registrant numbers are so high, but then they drop after the next LSAT scores come out. We saw this in November and January and February. No need to catastrophize about it. Those numbers are going to drop. The numbers you saw prior to today's score release are not an accurate reflection of the actual number of people who will take it in June. The number who actually take it in June will be at least 10, 20% lower. And the number who actually maintain reportable scores after the June LSAT will also probably be 20% lower because even those who take it will cancel. So don't worry about it. I do think June numbers will be a little bit higher than otherwise just because June is the last LSAT that you can take remotely. Starting in August, LSAC is going back to in-person only with rare exceptions. For the past couple of years, you've been able to take the LSAT either remotely from home on your own device or in person at a parametric testing center. But due to some LSAT cheating that LSAC wants to crack down on, they are discontinuing the remote LSAT with rare exceptions, and it will be only in person for the vast majority of test takers starting in August. And if you're wondering, well, what are those exceptions? Who will still be able to take it remotely? It's going to be people with unique medical accommodations and those who live crazy far from a test center, basically. So if you live in the middle of nowhere and it would pose an extreme hardship for you to commute in person to a testing center, they will let you take it remotely, but those are the exception, not the rule. And LSAC has not published exactly what the details will be of who can take it remotely, but chances are it's probably not you. Aneshka asks, how often should I take practice tests using a drilling platform? Don't know if it's the best. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the problems with the unofficial drilling platforms is that their software does not reflect what test day is actually going to look like. And part of why students' scores drop from their practice test to the actual is because they're not familiar with the test day interface, the test day experience. And it can kind of throw you for a loop when the official Prometric software looks and feels different. The software is different. The functionality, the highlighting, the underlining, the font style, all of the details, the coloring all looks different. And so for that reason, I recommend that everybody take their practice tests on the official LSAC Law Hub platform. That is the only software that reflects exactly what test day is going to look like. And as part of LSAC's attempt to crack down on the cheating, they are also changing the user interface starting in August. So yet again, another LSAT change coming up. If you practice with some unofficial third-party software, it's going to look and feel different in August, and you don't want your score to drop because you're not familiar with it. And I see we had a question about what the interface was. I'm seeing if I could find it. Not seeing it right now, but somebody was asking about the LSAT format change. And so basically, the only LSAT format change coming up is the user interface change starting in August, and then the change back to in-person for almost everybody. The LSAT is not changing in any other way, at least not officially, meaning it's still going to be 2 scored logical reasoning sections, 1 scored reading comp section, and then 1 unscored extra section of either logical reasoning or reading comprehension. No official changes otherwise, no new LSAT question type or anything like that. But to Anisha's question about practice tests, I realize I didn't answer that directly. It depends on when you're taking the LSAT. If you're taking the LSAT in June or August, I would probably recommend at least 1 timed practice test a week. If you're studying for the LSAT full-time, especially for those taking the LSAT in June, I would recommend 2 timed practice tests a week just to get more under your belt. The goal being that test day will be like just another run through and you've done it all before. I don't have enough context to give more advice than that in particular. I'd also want to make sure that you have a strong foundation in the different LSAT sections and the different LSAT question types. And so if you want to talk through the particulars of your situation so I can give you more direct guidance and more tailored advice, you can book the free LSAT tutoring lesson with me and we could talk through it more. The link to book that is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That's an open offer, by the way, for anybody watching this now and later. I see Charlotte is asking, I got a 157. I'm planning on taking it again in August. Should I keep or cancel my score? Then Smokeseam responds, don't cancel your score. Law schools can see it and they will automatically assume the worst. The truth is that it doesn't really matter whether you cancel your score because law schools don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest score. And as Smokeseam correctly says, law schools can see if you canceled and they will assume that if you chose to cancel your score, it probably didn't go very well because if it had gone well, you wouldn't have canceled. So cancellations are really an artifact of back when law schools did average multiple scores, but they no longer do. So all else being equal, I'd probably keep it just because 157 is, strictly speaking, an above average LSAT score. The average or median score is being roughly around a 152 or so. So I don't know where you want to go to law school or what your goals are. I'm guessing if you're asking about canceling, you were probably hoping for a lot better. But a 157 is not an embarrassingly low score. And regardless, if you're retaking at a higher score, the higher score is what is going to count. So do whatever you feel better about. Doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And feel free to keep the questions coming. Feel free to ask any follow-ups. I see Dialecticals asking, 3.2 GPA, 152 LSAT. Should I retake or go ahead and apply to some less prestigious law schools? I would retake because the GPA is, frankly speaking, a bit low just due to grade inflation. LSAT score is also relatively low. It's the average of what those taking the LSAT, but not the average of those who apply to law school. Basically, those who apply are a higher scoring group than those who just take it, because those who just take it, many don't go on to law school. And so I would retake, because even if you are okay with going to a less prestigious law school, you probably want to go to a less prestigious school with more scholarship money, right? So either way, whether you want to go to a high-ranked law school, or if you want to go to a tier 1 or top-tier law school, or you're willing or okay with going to a lower-ranked law school, you still want to get better outcomes when it comes to scholarships. And the higher LSAT score is the best path forward to get the better outcomes, to get into better schools, to get more scholarship money. And you do want to offset that lower GPA with a higher LSAT. If you could get even 10, 15 points higher, you're going to get significantly better outcomes. So yes, I would recommend retaking. Yazin or Yazin says, got a 173 on my first take. Congrats, that's awesome. Asking, should I retake again? I'm trying to get a hefty scholarship to a school like UMich. And so no, it is not crazy to ask the question. Retaking might not be a bad idea. If you could get a 175, 176, you're more likely to get the scholarship money, especially from a top law school like UMich. I mean, I don't know UMich's exact LSAT median. You could drop it in the chat if you happen to know off the bat, which I hope you do. But basically, the top 14 law schools all have LSAT medians of 170 to 174. So you're saying UMich has a 171 median, so you are technically 2 points above their LSAT median. But then my next question is, what is your GPA and what is their GPA median? Because if you're below their GPA median, then you're really going to want to have a higher LSAT score to compensate, even higher than the 173. So for any T14 school, if you want merit aid, I'd want you to have above a 175. Also consider that the medians are a trailing metric. They reflect last year's numbers, and law schools are always trying to raise their medians, and the applicant pool is always getting more competitive because of LSAT score inflation and GPA inflation as well. So for better outcomes, I would say yes, retake. You could retake it in June, you could retake it in August and still apply as soon as applications open in the fall. So you're saying that your GPA is a 3.8, which is a solid GPA, but their median is a 3.88, nearly 0.1 higher, which is a significant difference. So yeah, I would retake. And even if it's a second or third retake, I would still retake in June or August. And retake prep doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be as little as taking a practice test a week, reviewing it in depth. That alone might be enough. And feel free to reach out if you want to talk through what your retake prep could look like. Duncan's asking, what were the stats for the April LSAT? I mean, what kind of stats are you looking for? I think LSAC updates their volume summary data every morning, but it's a kind of early morning, middle of the night. And so we might not see the latest numbers until tomorrow. But you can look up today's. If you just Google LSAC volume summary, you'll be able to see a pretty good reflection of the number of people who took the April LSAT and those who are signed up for June. But the June numbers will be a lot more accurate or reflective tomorrow once people who took it to the April LSAT today and got their scores back today, once they drop out of the June pool. But in terms of average score, we're not going to know. LSAC doesn't publish that data. So we're not going to know the average LSAT score. But the scores are pre-equated, which is a fancy technical term for saying that it's determined in advance. So the LSAT difficulty and percentiles and all that stuff is a 3-year rolling average. And so you're not curved against those who took that particular LSAT on that day or that week. It's more you're curved against everyone who took it over the past couple of years. And so it's not really, the April pool in particular is not especially indicative of anything useful. And LSAC doesn't publish the curve or the stats or anything for particular administrations. They don't even release the test forms because they reuse them. So you're not going to see anything useful out of that. Connor's asking, I got a 167. Do you think I can get in with a 397 GPA? Frankly, I don't know. I mean, there's hundreds of law schools. I'm not familiar with all their stats off the top of my head. If you're looking to go to a top tier school, of course, the LSAT requirements are going to be 170 plus typically. Your 397 GPA is, of course, fantastic. But a 167 is, frankly speaking, subpar for a top tier school. So I would recommend that you consider a retake, but look at the LSAT median for the particular school that you're targeting, and you'll get a better sense of what you need to do. But considering that we're only in April now, I would retake in June or August. I don't see a reason not to. I mean, with another month or 2 or 3 of studying, could you boost your score 3 to 5 points? Probably. Would that get you way better outcomes in terms of getting into better schools and getting more scholarships? Certainly. So why not do it? I don't even know why people ask the question, frankly speaking, because like it's basically asking, should I do more work to get a better result? Yes, of course. I mean, the people who get the best outcomes typically put in the work. I mean, your LSAT score and your improvement is going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. But I can't think of a higher leverage or higher value way to spend your time to get into better law schools, to get more scholarship money than retaking the LSAT. I mean, retaking the LSAT, getting a higher score, it's the easiest money you're ever going to make. It's going to save you tens of thousands, maybe even $100,000+ in scholarship money, saving on tuition, get you into better law schools, which will set the trajectory for the rest of your legal career. And so if you're asking, should I spend a couple more months to take a practice test a week, review it in depth, to have a better career for the next several decades, assuming that you're in your 20s or 30s or even 40s? Why wouldn't you make that trade? It's like suffer now for a couple months and then, to butcher a quote, live the rest of your life as a champion. Like suffer now, put in a bit of work now, and you will reap the rewards for decades in terms of higher earning potential and taking on less debt. So why wouldn't you do that? And in terms of looking at median LSAT scores, it's very simple. You just Google X law school LSAT median 2025, and you'll see the recent data. There are 200 or so ABA approved law schools, and all of their medians are public on the American Bar Association website. For schools elsewhere, of course, it's going to be on their own website, but just go to the law school's website directly, click the admissions tab. It's probably published there. You could see both LSAT and GPA. And the reason you'll see different numbers in various websites is because they're from different years. So you don't want the outdated old information from some random blog. You want the newest information, which is going to come directly from the source, either from the law school themselves on their website, which will be up to date, or alternatively from the American Bar Association website. You can Google X Law School 509, and you'll see it on the ABA website. I see a follow-up from Yazin asking, are scholarships still available to receive past the priority deadline? I want to get into a good school, but top law schools' deadlines have passed, and I would need to apply for next cycle. Yeah, so if you're applying to law school now to start in roughly 4 months, yes, of course, you are way past the priority deadline. You're pretty late in this cycle. Technically speaking, you can still get scholarship money, but there is less available now, and it's also a bit harder to get in now. For the best outcomes, in terms of getting into better schools, getting more scholarship money, you're going to want to apply earlier in the cycle, not necessarily by the priority deadline, but just relatively early. So I would say if scholarship money is important to you, if getting into better schools is important to you, I would say hold off on applying at the tail end of this cycle. Instead, apply in September. The second application's open. Spend the summer working on your application essays, pulling together letters of rec, working on your resume, maybe retaking the LSAT if you think you can or should do better, and then apply in September when apps open. Grace is asking, I got a 164. Do you think I could retake and get into the 170s? I mean, I have no context on your situation, but strictly, generally speaking, I think that with the proper preparation, anybody can get into the 170s. The LSAT is not a test of intelligence. It's a test of how much you studied and the way in which you studied. So yes, you can improve 6 points or more to get into the 170s. Could you do by June? Maybe. Could you do by August? More likely. The question becomes, how much time are you going to put in and what kind of support are you going to get? Are you just self-studying with practice tests and LSAT prep phone books, or are you taking courses? Are you getting coaching? Are you getting personal feedback on what you're getting wrong and why? How did you study before? And what can you do differently next time around? And there's a lot of support available to you if you know where to look or if you want to reach out. I'm offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for anybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link to book it is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free easy LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab it at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. It covers every LSAT section, every LSAT question type in both logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You can grab it in the link in the description on YouTube or in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Again, the link is unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. It's a free resource I put together for everybody watching this now and later. Now I see Connor's asking, if your second LSAT score is lower, can you apply with the first one without the school seeing the second one? So all LSAT scores will show up on your LSAT score report. Law schools can see all the scores, but the good news is they only consider the highest score on your record, meaning they do not average multiple LSAT scores, so no big deal, honestly. In terms of pricing for tutoring, we customize every program for the individual student, considering where you're currently at, what your goal score is, and what your time frame is. And so if you want to talk through what a personalized plan could look like, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You can book the free tutoring with me. We'll talk through it more. In terms of where to apply for scholarships, there are some random organizations that do offer scholarships, but for the most part, the way to get scholarship money for law school is to get it directly from the school by applying with strong numbers. If you apply with an LSAT score and a GPA of above the medians of the schools that you're considering, basically, if you are strong relative to their applicant pool and strong relative to their current class, they will offer you scholarships without your even asking because they want to incentivize you to go to their school in particular. Now, if your numbers are strong, they will likely make you an offer, but then you can negotiate for an even better and bigger offer based on the strength of your numbers and based on the offers you've gotten from other law schools, which is why it's never a good idea to apply to only one law school. I would apply to several. I would apply to a dozen or more. That way, when you apply to more schools, you get more offers back and you have more scholarship negotiation leverage because you can say to school A, hey, I'd love to go to your school, but school B offered me more. I prefer your school, but financials are financials. And so I got to consider my own unique situation here. I don't want to take on debt. Can you give me more money? And if your numbers are strong, if you are a compelling applicant based on your numbers, then you will get more scholarship money, which is why folks retake the LSAT to apply above the median, not just to get in, but also get more scholarship money. And if you can apply with an LSAT score and a GPA above not only the median, but above the 75th percentile of the school that you're looking at, then you are relatively even more likely to get more money. Olivia is asking, should I cancel my LSAT score if I plan on taking it again? Doesn't really matter whether you cancel or not, because if you cancel, law schools will assume it didn't go well. If you keep the score and you get a higher score later, the higher score is what counts. So truly, it doesn't matter a whole lot either way. Got a question asking, how many letters of rec should I have? Minimum 2, ideally 3. If you have really great recommenders available to you, then even 4 is not too many. So the range is 2 to 4. And if you're still in college, of course, getting it from a professor is good. If you've been out of school for a long time, don't stress if you can't get a good professor letter because it's been a while and they don't remember you anymore. Then just get from employers, internship supervisors, anyone, volunteer work supervisors, anyone who knows you well and can speak to your work ethic, your character, your persistence. The strength of the letter matters more than the prestige of the recommender. And if you are applying to law school this fall, you've still got plenty of time to cultivate relationships to get stronger letters. In other words, don't ask now if you don't have anybody good to ask, because then you're going to get a mediocre letter. Instead, spend some time warming up the relationship first and then ask for the letter later. You could ask for it in June and still get the letter in time for applications in the fall. And how do you get good letters? How do you cultivate good relationships? Go the extra mile. Be proactive. Volunteer for things. If it's in school, if you're in college, go to office hours, raise your hand in class, do the reading and show that you've done the reading. Doing that alone will stand out. And professors appreciate it when you're actually passionate about their subject. And so few students do that. If you do, you will stand out. Don't be afraid to be that guy or that girl. Don't be embarrassed by being a gunner. You know, the embarrassment you might have from being a gunner and being that guy or that girl is temporary, but the benefits you get from a stronger letter and a better grading class, a better GPA, will pay dividends over the course of the next several decades of your career if they can get you into a better law school and get more scholarship money. SABE Rules says, for low GPA applicants, when do you suggest doing a post-bac? I wouldn't, because it wouldn't affect your GPA for law school admissions purposes. For law school admissions purposes, your GPA is basically everything that goes into earning your first bachelor's degree. Once you've earned the first bachelor's degree, your post-bac, your master's, none of that counts. They'll see it. It's a soft factor, but is not formally calculated in the law school admissions index, which is the formula where they input your LSAT score and your GPA to calculate your chances. So in other words, it would be wasted effort and wasted time. That time and effort is better spent on getting a higher LSAT score, which of course there is no deadline on. Like your GPA is a done deal once you finish your bachelor's, but you can retake the LSAT and your effort's better devoted there. Also consider that even if you could redo a couple of classes from undergrad, how much is that going to move the needle? I mean, undergrad is typically speaking roughly 4 years, 120 credits. Marginally improving 3 or 6 credits is not going to really do a lot to raise your GPA. It's going to have a negligible impact. In contrast, 1 day, 2.5 hours, getting a higher LSAT score, that weighs more heavily than all of undergrad combined. So why not spend your efforts there? I see Bridget said she got an 11-point jump. It's all worth it. Awesome. Congrats, Bridget. That's really great to hear. I wish you all the success that you can get in the law school admissions process. Time to switch gears now and focus on your application essays. Sweet. Thanks for chiming in there. Kendricks is asking, do you have advice if this next administration is my 5th attempt and I'd be locked out after this? So advice for retakers in general would be, what can you do differently next time around? What did you do in the lead up to these previous 4 LSATs that led them to not go well? How did you study? Did you put in enough time? Did you take a course? Did you get coaching? Did you get personal feedback on what you were getting wrong and why? Or were you just self-studying? With practice tests and books on Amazon, keep in mind that a lot of those prep books are AI-generated slop, and a lot of them contain fake LSAT questions. They're unrealistic. Don't use LSAT for dummies and expect a top score. If you look at the reviews, even a lot of those fake questions are full of mistakes and errors and are unrealistic. And so not a good use of your time. Getting some hand-me-down prep book from an older sibling or a friend who didn't know enough to research better resources is not a good use of your time. Don't try to save money on a $20 book when your LSAT score hangs in the balance. And the LSAT's online now anyway, so studying out of books is kind of archaic and outdated. I'd rather you get more familiarity with the actual test day interface using the LSAC Law Hub platform. On Law Hub, you get 4 exams for free just by creating a free lsac.org account. You get the others with a Law Hub Advantage subscription. Well worth the investment, $120 for a full year of access. The thing is, those practice tests don't come with explanations for the most part, and there's no one you could talk to or get feedback. And so if you want some personal guidance on what to do for your retake prep, you can book the free LSAT tutoring with me. I could talk you through getting you some more hands-on support to make sure that your next LSAT is your last LSAT. And Bridget, I'm glad to hear the videos helped a lot. All the best in admissions. So feel free to keep the questions coming in, folks. We're about an hour in so far. I'll keep going for as long as I can. Anything at all, LSAT Law School Admissions, happy to give you some guidance, give you some support on your prep. For those just joining, I normally do these lives at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. Doing it earlier today not because I like waking up earlier, because I like making you all wake up early, but because of the April LSAT score release. LSAT scores came out about 45 minutes ago at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And I want to support everyone who did not get their goal score and is looking for a retake. And of course, congratulate those who did get their goal scores and are done with the LSAT. But we have several more LSATs coming up. We've got the June LSAT in 5 weeks, August LSAT in about 3 months. Don't rush it for June in 5 weeks. If you feel that you need more time, you could take it in August and improve your score a lot more with more than double the study duration and still apply the second applications open in the fall. If you find these lives helpful, I do them every single weekday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. Please spread the word about this. I really do appreciate your support. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because the LSAT's, just frankly speaking, not a super sexy topic, so the algo doesn't really recommend it that much. So please share it to your socials, share it in any group chats you're part of, Facebook groups, subreddits, Discords. The more this grows, the more I'll expand it over time. I've also put together a free, easy LSAT cheat sheet for anyone who's looking for additional references and guidance. It covers everything in logical reasoning and reading comprehension as a quick reference to help you jumpstart your prep or serve as a quick refresher. You can grab the free LSAT cheat sheet at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. The link is in the description below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now and later. So feel free to keep the questions coming. I'll get to as many as I can. Just scanning through the chat for more questions in case I missed anything here. Zebo's asking, I couldn't get scholarship money when I got into law school, so I decided to go into tech sales. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, like law school, this might sound strange for me to say as someone who helps people get into law school, but I don't think going to law school makes sense in every single circumstance. If you're making a good living with what you're currently doing, it might make sense to just stay with what you're currently doing. If you don't get a sufficiently high LSAT score to get a full ride to law school or get significant scholarship money, might not be worth going. If it's hard to relocate and you don't want to go to law school online, might not make sense either. I mean, my goal is to help you get into law school with an offer that makes sense for you to actually go for the degree. In many cases, that means getting a significant discount on tuition, getting a full ride, getting a higher LSAT score to earn that scholarship. In other cases, it means going to a top law school that will give you significant earning power post-graduation. The top 14 law schools are top law schools because they have great outcomes and can source great applicants. They have good pipelines into big law and judicial clerkships and such. And so if you wanted to go into big law, if you want a clerkship, then going to a top law school makes sense sometimes, even if you don't get a lot of scholarship money. But in many cases, it makes more sense to go to a lower ranked law school and get more scholarship money and avoid taking on the debt. For those who aren't aware, the Grad Plus loans are being eliminated starting in July 1st. The federal government's capping how much you can borrow for law school. So you're going to be capped at $50,000 a year, $200,000 for life in terms of graduate school loans. And so that means that if a law school charges more than $50,000 a year, which most of them do, the question becomes, how do you make up the gap between what they charge and what you can borrow? The average cost of attendance is $84,000 a year. So there's a $34,000 gap between what you can borrow and what you'd have to pay all in. And so for that reason, it's worth, in many cases, going to a lower ranked law school where you can get more scholarship money to offset the cost of tuition. So that way you're not resorting to private loans with higher interest rates or asking friends and family to help make up the gap. So my goal is to really help you avoid taking on the private loans with higher interest, avoid going to friends and family, avoid digging into savings, and not have to pay out of pocket for law school. Ideally, I'd also love for you to not have to take on the debt even from the government loans as well. And so the higher LSAT score, higher median, higher stats is a better way to do that. I see drama fans asking, will law schools reduce tuition? The answer is maybe. Maybe some will, some won't. A lot of the higher ranked schools can, because they're not dependent on tuition to maintain their operations. The ones that are backed by a big endowment and are attached to a university can get other sources of funding for their operations. But a lot of the lower ranked law schools that are tuition dependent do need to rely on tuition from students, meaning students are funding the school, and so they can't afford to discount tuition that much. However, virtually any law school, with rare exceptions, will discount their tuition for you if you can apply with sufficiently strong numbers. If you can apply with a higher LSAT score, a higher GPA, sufficiently above the medians, then law schools will offer you scholarship money to incentivize you to choose their law school to attend, because you will help them raise their standing in the ever important US News rankings. And there's that question of why law schools live and die by their rankings, and part of it is prestige. It's a prestige game. If they can rise in the rankings, they can attract more applicants for the next year, and they can also attract more money from donors. And so for that reason, they will actually pay you to choose their law school if you can help them raise their standing. And that's why I keep emphasizing strong LSAT score, strong GPA. The thing is that for most of you watching this, if you've already taken the LSAT, I'm guessing that you are late in college, if not having already graduated. And so your GPA from undergrad might be relatively fixed at this point in time. Not a whole lot you could do to change that, but getting a higher LSAT score and retaking will help you get more scholarships, and so that's the path forward to go for. Don Quixote is asking, does it matter what law school I go to? I would think so. I mean, what do you want to do with your law degree? In virtually every circumstance, it does matter. Now, if your parents own a law firm and you're just going to work in the family business, or if you want to open your own shingle, open your own practice, then maybe the prestige of your law school doesn't really matter. But that's typically the exception, not the rule. I think for most folks, that's not their situation. And so if you are applying to a law firm to be hired, or applying for a judicial clerkship, for example, then the pipelines for employment do matter. And different law schools have very different employment outcomes. The American Bar Association just released its employment data for every American Bar Association approved law school. I was covering those over the past week on the YouTube channel. If you go to the live tab on the YouTube channel, LSAT Unplugged, linked in my bio on TikTok and IG, you'll be able to see the videos where I walked through the law schools with the worst employment outcomes so that you can know which law schools to avoid. Some law schools do not have very good outcomes, and you want to go in as an informed consumer, knowing which law schools have better and worse outcomes for their applicants, considering that you're making an investment when you choose a law school, and you want to know that you're going to get a good return on that investment by getting better employment outcomes. And so different law schools having different outcomes means it matters where you go to law school. And if you want to go to a law school with relatively worse outcomes, which I don't know why you would, but if you are willing to make that trade, you want to pay less for law school in compensation for choosing a school that has typically worse outcomes in terms of employment rates and bar passage rates as well. Drama is asking, is there ever any point at which law schools will discount your undergraduate GPA, like 7, 10, or 15 years out of college? Yeah, they do. So in fact, the longer that you've been out of undergrad, the less your undergraduate GPA matters, and the more they value your LSAT score, because your LSAT score becomes a more recent and relatively better indication of your academic potential in law school. I mean, the LSAT is considered a valid and reliable admission test because it is correlated with first-year law school grades and bar passage rates, GPA to some extent as well, of course. But if it's been a while since you were in college, who you were back then is not who you are now. You've grown, you've changed, you've matured. And so law schools will focus more on your LSAT score as a more recent indication of your academic potential. I see Dagmay saying, I'm looking for support of changing tutoring. Yeah, reach out. We can definitely help you out with that. Just email, text, and the team will be happy to help you out with changing up your tutoring situation. Sorry to hear about things not working, but we're happy to help you out with that. Olivia is saying, took the LSAT for the first time in April, got a 146. I need 150s at least for my application. You said it doesn't really matter if I cancel my score, but does it negatively affect my application? I mean, not a whole lot. A lot of folks take the LSAT multiple times, and having 1 or 2 cancellations on your record is not a big deal. Having a pattern of 3, 4, 5 cancellations starts to look a bit fishy, of course, but having 1 or 2 cancellations, I wouldn't sweat it at all. Just focus on your retake prep going forward to get the higher score. Mayit is asking, if I signed up for the June LSAT, when can I pick my specific LSAT test date? So scheduling a particular day and time for your LSAT, that opens up a couple of weeks before the actual LSAT. So if you're taking the LSAT in June, that would be mid to late May when you can schedule with Prometric, choosing a specific day and time. So keep your eyes peeled for an email from LSAC from Prometric opening up the scheduling, but it's not going to be for a couple weeks. TC's asking, if my GPA is below the 25th percentile, I should shoot for an LSAT score above the 75th percentile? Yes, absolutely. And really, in general, why wouldn't you shoot for the highest LSAT score possible? But it becomes especially important when your GPA is relatively lower. You want to balance a lower GPA with a higher LSAT score to compensate. Yes. And the good news is that law schools love splitters. They weigh LSAT scores more heavily than GPA anyway, but it becomes even more important to get a higher LSAT when your GPA is relatively lower. Peter's asking, what should I do about law schools that have ghosted me? Yes, this is a really common issue, unfortunately, that law schools are taking longer and longer to get back to applicants. And so for that reason, you might apply in the fall and not hear back till late spring, early summer. It's a terrible thing for them to do, considering that you're putting in all this work for the application. You're paying an application fee. The least they could do is give you an update or make a decision in less than 6 months, but it is what it is. They hold all the cards. They have all the power here. And so not a whole lot you can do other than send a letter of continued interest, reiterating your interest in the school. Say, hey, so-and-so law school, you are still my #1 top choice. Here's an update on what I've been up to since I applied. Got this promotion at work, got this honor or award, retook the LSAT and got a higher score, which you can do, by the way. You can retake the LSAT and update them on that. And that could help you get off a wait list, help you get more scholarship money, help you get accepted and not wait anymore. So that might be something to think about. But at the minimum, letter of continued interest. Don't overdo it on the communication, though. They know that you're waiting. So sending just 1 update or maybe 2 updates spread out over a long period of time might be okay. Mariah says, I got ghosted by 3 schools and just withdrew because I was over it. It's mainly the private ones. I'm sorry to hear that you were ghosted. But yeah, I mean, sit tight. You might get off the wait list over the summer. There are folks who even get off the wait list in August and radically change their life plans very last minute. Don't think it's right that law schools do that to you, but because they can, they do. Mayit is asking, is drilling the only way to cut down on question time? Not at all. I mean, there's also pacing. There's also working on full exams as well. If anything, I think that taking individual timed LSAT sections will do a lot to help you with your pacing because it'll force you to speed up. In logical reasoning, for example, you have 35 minutes to solve roughly 25 questions. That means you have an average of about 1 minute and 24 seconds or so per question, but not every question is of equal difficulty. Some are easier and harder than others. And so what you want to do is consider that there's a general order of difficulty within logical reasoning, meaning the questions get tougher as the section goes on average. So you want to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes or so, build up a time bank that you could then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. And so if you want to solve the first 10 questions in 10 minutes, only 1 minute per question, that's pretty fast. So when you do more individual sections, you give yourself that time pressure that you're not getting when you're only drilling LSAT questions by type. So, if anything, if timing is a struggle, I would recommend that you stop the drilling and do more individual sections, do more full length exams as well. And I would adjust your study plan accordingly. If you're taking the LSAT in June or August, it's especially important to transition out of the drilling, do more individual sections, do more full exams. If you're taking it in the fall, you've got more time, but test day is not a drill. I think most students are overemphasizing the drilling, not doing enough time to work. You want to improve on timing? Do more time to work, as simple as that. And that's one of the things we cover in the study plans that we create for students. We look at where you're currently scoring, what your weak areas are, both in terms of individual LSAT question types and also in terms of weaknesses around pacing and time management as well. And then endurance, you want to build up your endurance, do more full exams. You don't want your performance to drop onto section 4 just because it is section 4. As a general rule, if you wanted to build up your endurance, could be a useful exercise to do the occasional 5-section exam so that 4 sections seems easy by comparison. Wouldn't do that every exam, of course. Don't over-index on this, but every once in a while, just to push your limits a little bit, do the occasional 5-section exam. If you want to build up your time management skills, you could, as an exercise, do some really strictly timed sections with less than 35 minutes. Don't do that all the time, of course, but maybe shave it down to 34-minute sections or 33-minute sections to give yourself some breathing room later so that 35 minutes seems like a lot. In general, I think that it would be ideal for you to solve any given LSAT section with a couple minutes to spare. That way you can go back and tackle any questions that you flagged or skipped and wanted to come back to later. You don't want to be in a place where you're running out of time and haven't completed the section when the clock runs out. Consider that there is no LSAT guessing penalty. So you do want to solve every single question, mark down something for every question, but push the limits a little bit, give yourself a little bit of extra pressure so that having 35 minutes seems like a lot, and push your endurance limits so that having 4 sections seems light in comparison to what test is actually going to be like. A is asking, when do I typically need to take the LSAT if I want to go to law school for that cycle? So in terms of needs, strictly speaking, the need would be the deadline of the law school. So when does the law school cut off applications and say, we will not take applications after this date? There are 200 different ABA law schools. Each law school has their own unique policies in terms of when their deadlines are. Typically, deadlines are going to be around February, March, April, but those are sometimes flexible. And the cycle has gotten later and later over time so that virtually every law school will take the results of the February LSAT. For that cycle, many will take the results of the April LSAT. But if you're asking the question now, I'm guessing that you haven't taken the LSAT yet and you're applying next cycle. So I'll say this, I mean, you could take the LSAT anytime this calendar year and apply relatively early in the cycle, meaning you could take it in June or August or September, October or November and apply early for the cycle. Taking it in January or February would not be too late, but I don't think that there's any need to wait until then because you've got time. I mean, it's only late April now. You could take the LSAT. I think that you'd have adequate time if you started now to take the LSAT within the next 6 months and hit virtually any goal score that you want if you're willing to put in the time and put in the work, study the right way, make a proper study plan for yourself, build a strong foundation in the different sections and different LSAT question types, then transition to doing individual sections to work on pacing and pull it all together with full-length exams. So I would say if you're starting now, you want a top score, aim to take the LSAT by October or November at the latest. You might be able to even knock it out sooner. Louv is asking, if I got a 160, should I apply for June deadlines? So you want to apply very late in the cycle with a June LSAT, with a LSAT score of 160. My question would be, what law schools are you looking at and what are their medians? If you are significantly above the medians with a 160, then your applying now could still end up being okay. if you're at or below the medians, you're not going to get the best outcomes with a score that's at or below the medians applying so late. You might be better off applying next cycle instead. And nobody ever wants to wait a year, of course, but if it could save you a lot of money in law school tuition or get you into better law schools, might be worth waiting, but all depends on the details here. Drama is asking, do you have an opinion on how the current administration's policies on diversity are affecting the quality of the law school's experience at institutions like the University of Texas Austin School of Law? I don't know, to be frank. I haven't looked into that school in particular. I'm curious if anyone has data on that. Because UT Austin is a public school, they're probably publishing more data on their class breakdown than a private institution might. So I'm curious, if you were just to Google that, what would you find in terms of the racial breakdown of the class? I mean, theoretically, of course, the Supreme Court banned race-based affirmative action a couple of years ago, so you would expect a decline in representation of underrepresented groups at any given law school. The government is, of course, looking into schools' potential continued practice of affirmative action. And there are some pending lawsuits, investigations related to this. And so we'll see what those turn up. But a lot of data is being released about this at various undergraduate institutions and universities and law schools in general. So I don't have the answers, but you might find something by searching. My name is Riri's asking, how likely am I to get off the Villanova waitlist? I don't know. There are a lot of folks waitlisted this cycle, so there will be a lot of waitlist movement over the next couple months. The likelihood of any individual student getting off the waitlist is hard to say, of course. I don't have any more information than you do, and probably less because I don't know your application profile right now. But if your numbers are strong relative to their medians, then you've got a relatively better chance. User 6, but good luck. I would say send a letter of continued interest if you haven't already. And if you have room to improve on your LSAT score, to improve your odds of getting off the wait list, you might want to take it in June just to see what happens. In terms of I see user 6922 is asking, how long does it take to get your LSAT score back? Typically 2 to 3 weeks, approximately. And you can look up on the LSAC website, if you just Google LSAT test dates, you'll see the score release date relative to the LSAT test administration date. It's typically about 2.5 to 3 weeks between taking the LSAT and getting your score back. And if you're wondering why it takes so long, the answer is because they are crunching the numbers to make sure that the performance of the test taking pool reflects what they wanted it to, meaning they have a certain idea in terms of the statistical breakdown of how people should do based on any given test form, based on their pre-equation of those LSAT questions as prior experimental sections. But they're testing the questions out on a much larger pool on the official LSAT with tens of thousands of people. And so they want to make sure that people performed as expected, and maybe also looking into any irregularities in terms of performance. And so they're crunching the numbers on that over the course of those few weeks before they give you your score back. Now, I think they should at least give you a raw score breakdown in the short term in terms of how many questions you got right, give you a general sense of how you did, but they don't give you anything, and they don't have to because they're a virtual monopoly, so they can kind of make their own rules and everyone's just got to deal with it. I don't think it's right, but they're going to do what they're going to do. Bingy says, use the Schwartz. Yeah, definitely got that one a lot over the years. Love it. See a question about LSAT writing sample. How much does it matter? I know it isn't graded, but I'm worried. The writing sample really doesn't matter a whole lot because it's not scored. So I don't think you have a reason to worry about it. If you can write decently, you're probably going to be fine. Just give it your full effort. Give them a clear roadmap of what you're going to talk about. Intro paragraph, a couple body paragraphs, conclusion. Leave it at that. Have a clear thesis statement. argue in favor of your chosen thesis statement, give a couple of evidence pieces supporting that, acknowledge the weaknesses of your side in favor of the other side, but then downplay them in favor of your side. That's it. That's all you got to do. It's not scored for now. It may be scored next year. We'll see what happens. LSAC has indicated they are planning to score it in the near future, maybe because of AI written application essays, because law schools are pushing for them to score the writing sample. They've even added a field to the score report called the writing ability score, but it's currently in a not applicable blank. But they don't add fields to score reports for no reason, right? So they're probably going to score it in the next couple of years. When they do, though, they will give plenty of notice. At the earliest, it would be, I'm guessing, August of next year, of 2027, but we'll see what happens. In terms of bar passage and employment rates you want to look for at given law schools, look at my videos over the past week on this. On the live tab on the YouTube channel, I went in depth on the worst law schools with the worst outcomes. So I would say look to be significantly above those, and then look at where you get in, look at your target schools and see how you stack up. It's all a relative thing. There's no one absolute right number on this. Bar passage rates are also kind of funny because different states have different difficulty levels. And so the bar exam in some states is easier or harder than others. For example, New York and California, I understand, have pretty difficult bar exams. Other states might have easier bar exams. And so what you want to look at is a given law school's bar exam passage rate relative to the state average. But there is a lot of variation there. Some law schools like Cooley, for example, are way below the state average bar passage rate. And so that's kind of a red flag you want to steer clear of. And I'm talking like 20 percentage points different, pretty significant. So be careful of that, but it's a relative thing, not an absolute thing. You also want to look at employment in particular areas. For example, do you want to get employment in big law, for example? Some law schools have really great big law placement rates, others not so much. It varies. It's all relative. Zach says, I got the exact same score. I completely self-studied and I'm feeling really disheartened. Any advice? Sorry to hear it, Zach. You're not the only one here who is not happy with their April LSAT score. My first thought for you would be, what could you do differently on a retake? Sounds like if you only self-studied and you didn't get support, there's untapped potential there. I mean, when you're studying on your own, the thing is that you don't know what you don't know, right? But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. So for example, a lot of students will come to us for the tutoring and they'll be under some major misconceptions regarding really common LSAT question types. Like for example, they're confused about the distinction between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions. Those are completely different question types. Students will lump them under the catch-all category of assumption. Even some prep companies, not going to name names, but even some prep companies will conflate them under the catch-all category of assumption when they're asking for very different things. Necessary assumption questions are a very specific kind of must be a true question, asking for what is required in order for the argument to work. Sufficient assumption questions, on the other hand, have very different words and phrases synonymous with sufficiency, like allows, enables, follows logically if assumed, and they're asking for new information that, if true, would guarantee the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. Not to go off on a tangent or anything, but my point being that when you're self-studying, there may be something similar for you where you don't even know that you don't know it. And so as a result of that, you're getting questions wrong that with one single tutoring lesson, you could get clarity on and get a pretty quick score boost. And so if you took a course, if you got coaching, if you got some personalized feedback, a custom study plan, how much better could you do? I don't know the answer. And take what I say with a grain of salt, because of course, it's my business to provide LSAT prep support. But think through it. If you want to talk through some prep options, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. That's an open offer for anybody watching this now or later, by the way. See, Banking Plan says, how you doing? So I'm imagining in my head, like, how you doing? Pretty good, thanks. Having a good time here. I see Emmett says, got a 156 on my first attempt. Awesome, congrats. Saying that you're very happy about it. top choice school has a median LSAT of 150. That's great. I mean, sometimes all you need is to score above the median of your target school, and that's good enough for you. For other students, might have wanted to retake that, but if it's all you need and you're happy with the outcomes you're going to get for that, then you're okay. Do consider that the goal may not be simply to get above the median, though. In some cases, you might want to score significantly above the 75th percentile to not only get into the law school, but also get scholarship money, and also in some cases to offset a relatively lower LSAT, a relatively lower GPA. That might not be the case for Emmett, of course, but for some other students, just worth keeping in mind. Now, in addition to the free LSAT tutoring lesson I mentioned, I'm also offering a free easy LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep or serve as a quick refresher. The link to get that free easy LSAT cheat sheet is unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. The link to get it is below the video on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. It's covering everything logical reasoning and reading comp. It's nice to have there as a quick refresher, and it's 100% free. You can grab it below the video or in my bio as well on TikTok and Instagram. Happy to help you out with that as well. Happy to stick around and answer more questions, LSAT, law school admissions, anything at all. I'm just scanning through the chat here for those, anything I missed. Foreign Ting says, so happy to see you back. Happy to see you back. I mean, I normally do these lives at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, so maybe our schedules didn't line up. Doing this one a bit earlier today because of the April LSAT score release. For those who aren't aware, scores just dropped a little over an hour ago, and so I'm here a bit early just to support everybody in terms of next steps. If you took the April LSAT, if you're retaking in June or August or beyond, happy to talk you through your next steps. If you're happy with your score, congrats, that's also great. At this point, I would say it's time to switch gears and focus on your application essays. You've got the whole summer to work on them, though. Applications don't open up until September, but the best writing happens over a relatively longer period of time. You go through multiple drafts, print it out on a physical printer actually, and use a red pen to mark it up. Really helps you get a bit more critical on your writing. The one thing I would definitely do now for any of you, whether you're done with the LSAT or not, is request your recommendation letters in the short term, because your recommenders are likely writing letters for multiple people, not just you, especially if they're a professor, and you don't want to be at the end of the line. You don't want your application delayed because you're waiting on someone else to do something for you. So request the letter early if you can. Give them a bulleted list of things you want them to cover. It makes it easier for them. So talk about, if you wrote a paper in class, for example, could you talk about that? If it was a project at work you did, could you talk about that for your employer who's a recommender for you? So a quick cheat sheet or list for them to make it easier for them to write the letter. That way they will also write a better letter because they can include more details more easily. And I'm not saying to write it for them or anything, but at least a bulleted list might be useful to do. The last thing you want them to do is using ChatGPT to make something vague and because they don't know enough to say. And if you don't yet have the relationships that will get you a good letter, I would say first cultivate the relationship, then ask for the letter, then you will get a better letter. And always go for the quality of the letter over the prestige of the recommender. In other words, don't ask your parents' friend who's a judge to write you a letter because you think it's going to look good to have a letter from a judge. If they're just going to say so-and-so is a nice kid, but they've never actually worked with you in any capacity, if they've never supervised you directly, it's not going to carry the same weight. It's not going to have the same punch. So I would say quality of the letter first and foremost, someone who actually knows you well and can speak to your character, your work ethic, your persistence, and ask for the letter early. Now is not too early to ask. It might take them a few months, but at least if the letter is sitting in your lsac.org account, then when you have your LSAT score in hand, if you're retaking, once you have your application essays ready, you can hit submit on the applications the second they open in September. And the benefit of applying early is that there is more scholarship money available. It's also easier to get into law school. And so you want to be able to hit submit when the letter comes in, when the scores come back. If you're retaking, you don't want to be waiting on someone else doing something else for you. So thanks for joining, folks. If you haven't already, book the free LSAT tutoring with me. Link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Happy to meet with anybody watching this now and later. to help you plan your next steps if you are planning to retake the LSAT. If you haven't already, you can also grab the free easy LSAT cheat sheet linked below the video, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Free resource covering everything LSAT and law school admissions. Quick reference for you, totally free, no obligation. I'll be back on Tuesday. I'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. Thanks for joining. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks.